This is the HaltingWinter Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Winterhalter. HaltingWinter is a coaching consulting company dedicated to helping leaders and organizations operate at peak performance. Today, we're going to dive into a book. In fact, we're just going to dive into one thought on this book. This book is called Hero on a Mission. It's by Donal Miller. Donal Miller runs a successful branding, marketing, coaching, consulting company. I've resonated with Donal Miller's writings for many years. One of his first books, Blue Like Jazz, kind of struck me in just the way he writes, the way he thinks. And I've really enjoyed this book. And before I dive into the idea, let me just encourage you, subscribe to the podcast, like us, write a comment, do something to help the algorithm so other people learn more about our program. If you're listening to the podcast, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Pound that like button, or whatever the kids say. Okay, let's dive in. This is, again, Hero on a Mission, Donal Miller. He says this, page 4, he says, "For practical purposes, it is my position that the author of our stories is actually us. Perhaps the single greatest paradigm shift I've had as a human is this idea. I am writing my story, and I alone have the responsibility to shape it into something meaningful." The greatest paradigm shift Donal Miller states in this book that he's had as a human is this idea. Let me read it again. The idea is this: I am writing my story, and I alone have the responsibility to shape it into something meaningful. I want to talk about this today because I want to talk about the idea of owning your story. Owning your story. You might say, what does this have to do with organizational leadership? What does this have to do with personal development? And I would say everything. Because everything is telling a story. Your life is telling a story. Your company is telling a story. You want better sales. You want better identity. You want better growth. Tell a better story. Be a part of a better story. I alone have the responsibility to shape my story, my company story, my life story, into something meaningful. So today I want to talk about 3 things that are keeping us from owning our story. Three things that are keeping us from owning our personal story and maybe the story that our company is trying to tell. What does it mean to own your story first? What does it mean to shape your story, to change your story? Some of you feel like, well, maybe you're older, right? You're over 40. And so you say, but my story is already kind of written. I can't change who I am. I can't change my story. I'm stuck. No, you're not. You're never stuck. You are never done until you're in the dirt. You can still shape your story. Same thing, you might say, well, I'm a part of a company that's been around for 100 years. We can't just uproot ourselves and change. Yes, you can. In fact, that's kind of the premise of one of the best business books out, Good to Great, Jim Collins. He mentions in that book multiple organizations that changed the way they operated, changed what people even thought about them, who they were, into something different, to change with the times, to meet their customers' expectations or changing ways, to continue to thrive instead of die. Just to stay the same. They changed their story. They adapted their story. They owned their story because their story was about being impactful, being effective, not just doing one thing. So what is keeping us from owning our stories? What's keeping you from owning your story? 3 things. Number 1, fear. This has to do with the mind. What keeps us from owning our story? The things that go on in our mind. And what is that number 1 predominant thing that keeps us from owning or shaping or changing our story? It is fear. Fear of messing our story up. fear, like this is where I think when we start out, this is a lot of young people are in this. Well, what if I mess up? What if I don't get to where I'm supposed to be? What if I, all these kind of fears. And the issue, I think, how do we overcome this fear? The number one way we overcome this fear is we remember that your story isn't a written out map. It is not already written with a destination in mind. Your journey, your life story is an adventure. We're going to figure it out. It hasn't been written yet. I don't care who you are. I don't care what expectations are called upon you by your parents, by friends, by what mentors. You are responsible for you. Write the story that you want to be a part of. Stop feeling the demands, expectations, obligations of others. Fears. Fear of messing it up. Fear of not making it perfect. What about failure? It's easier sometimes to be comfortable than it is to be daring, risking. We fear of messing it up, of it not being perfect, of it not being the fairy tale, perfect story tale fable. Well, no story's perfect. In fact, a perfect story would be a boring story. Every story, think about it, every story Disney tells, all these princess fables, all these prince, princess, king, queen, whatever, they all have drama in them. That's what makes a good story. If you're avoiding drama, if you're avoiding the possibility of drama, then you are missing out the whole point of a story. And so your fear is actually keeping you from the life that you want, the story you desire to tell. Don't be afraid. Embrace it. Embrace the possibility of failure. It's in failure that we are able to grow. We're able to learn. We're able to become better. What's keeping you from your own story, from changing it, shaping it, living it? Fear. The things going on in your mind. Number 2, the things keeping you from owning your story is just the work. This is really the physical realities of life. An epic story takes work, it takes movement, it takes you getting out of your comfortability and getting into action. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be enjoyable all the time. It's going to take early mornings and late nights. It's going to take confrontation. It's going to take a risk. It's going to involve pain and suffering. Now, you can avoid all that, or you can attempt to avoid all that by trying to say, well, that's why I'm not going to live out my passions. I'm not going to live out my purpose. I don't want to take risk. I don't want pain and suffering, so I'll just sit here. But here's the truth with life. Pain and suffering has a tendency to just find us. Pain and suffering has a tendency to come upon everyone, no matter what condition. No matter if you're rich or poor, no matter if you live in the suburbs or the urban or the rural. You can go to Montana, you can go to Idaho, you can go to Timbuktu and surround yourself with acres and walls and fences, and suffering will find you too. So we need to be careful. We need to be careful of the lie that says, I don't want an adventure because I'm afraid of pain and suffering. What if you have a boring, unfulfilled life and experience pain and suffering too? Doesn't seem worth the risk. And the joy, I think, of pain and suffering as a part of good work, hard work, work that's actually leading you towards a fulfilled purpose, that pain and suffering is worth it. It's worth it. So what's keeping you from owning your story? Well, fears, the things going on in our mind, work, the hard work, the efforts of our physical body, the efforts of our physicality in discipline and dedication, devotion to an end, to not give up when it gets hard, to not turn back when we face obstacles. Number 1, fear. Number 2, work. What's number 3? What's keeping you from owning your story, from shaping it, from changing it into something meaningful? I would say number 3 is fortitude. Fear in the mind, work in the body, fortitude of the emotions. You need to be self-aware and in self-control of your emotions if you want to shape a meaningful story. Because guess what? There are haters in life. There are people that will be the same people who will not own their story, who will look at you who does and be jealous and envious, and who will try to tear you down because you are doing something they wish they had the ability to do. Now they do have the ability. They just don't want to deal with their fears. They don't want to do the hard work. And they don't want to be in control of their emotions. And so they allow their out of control emotions to spew all over you. Haters. Doubters. People that, again, haven't gotten past stage 1, all the fears, and so they push their fears towards you. They try to derail you with their fears. Be careful. Have the emotional fortitude to be able to, again, hear that. Because sometimes there's truth, even amongst the doubters and the haters. And we never want to be totally closed off to truth and to wisdom. But filter it. Be mindful of where it's coming from, who it's coming from, and don't be dissuaded or dismayed. Do not allow them to get you down. Do not allow them to steer you away from the path of your story. Now, it's one thing to have emotional awareness about the people, the doubters and the haters who will come against us. There's another to deal with your own self-doubt. You have to have fortitude when it comes to self-doubt. You have to do the hard work of working through your limiting beliefs, the things that have kept you from owning your story, from shaping your story. What are those things in your mind that tell you you don't deserve this? You're not prepared for this. You don't have the wisdom, the knowledge, you don't have the degrees, you don't have the experience, you don't have. Yes, you do. Now, you have enough. You have enough. You have enough to take steps. You have enough because guess what? You have a brain, so you can learn. You have hands that can experience. You have enough. And that's part of the journey. In fact, a massive part of the journey is the experience of the journey. It's you growing and learning and developing. If you wait to write your story until you have all the tools and all the knowledge, then what's the point of writing the story? It's boring. It's already done. And how did you get all the knowledge and the wisdom to be able to write the story? See, there's the truth. To get the wisdom, to get the experience, you have to live. And some people aren't where they want to be because they won't take the steps. And so they are unable to learn, unable to experience. Just because a job description says needs 5 years of experience, needs 10 years of experience, needs this. Says who? Apply for it anyway. Sell yourself. I would much rather have someone who is driven working for me than someone who is experienced and has no drive left in them, who thinks that they're owed this job. They're owed this because they went to some school and have some degree. Again, I have multiple degrees. There's nothing wrong with college. There's nothing wrong with master's degrees, doctorate degrees. But just because you have those degrees means nothing unless you have actually learned and applied and done something with that experience and with that knowledge. And there are many ways to learn. Again, college programs don't have magical vaults with magical books that only those who go to those schools get access to. There's something called a public library, and all the books that you go and read at college, guess what? They're free at libraries. Now, I'm not saying that your public library is the same as a college experience. You should have teachers, and you should have social engagements, and you should write. That's the beauty of the social dynamic. But I've also been to a lot of colleges, and I've been in a lot of classrooms with teachers who sucked, who couldn't teach the way out of a wet paper bag. And I wasted money participating in their foolish class. So don't tell me that college is some golden egg parachute of knowledge. It's not. Learning is learning, and you can learn in a multiple variety of environments. And you need to. And you need to never stop learning. But you need to deal with self-doubt. You need to deal with limiting beliefs. And how do you do that? You get control of your emotions, and you know that I need to continue to learn. I need to continue to push myself. I need to continue to grow. See, that's really the third part of this fortitude, is the willingness to grow. The willingness to say, I haven't yet arrived. And it doesn't matter how many degrees, it doesn't matter how many YouTube videos I've watched, it doesn't matter how many friends I have in high places. I need to stay humble. I need to continue to grow. I need to continue to mature. I need to continue to develop, because once you lose that, your story stops writing itself. Once you think you've arrived, once you become entitled and think you deserve, I believe your story's over. I believe, excuse me, I believe it'll be hard to then shape your story into something meaningful, because once entitlement is just another word for bitterness. You just become bitter. You stop moving forward. You expect others to write your story for you. So, Donal Miller's quote, I alone have the responsibility to shape my life story into something meaningful. I alone have the responsibility to shape it into something meaningful. What is keeping you from owning your story? Is it fear? Is it the things going on in your mind? Is it the hard work? The ability to actually physically move and take steps and actions into writing your story? Are you afraid of the pain and suffering? Are you allowing the pain, the suffering, the obstacles to derail you from a meaningful story? Is it fear? Is it work? Or is it fortitude? Is it the emotional control with others, the doubters and the haters who will come against you and try to derail you from your story, or yourself? Are you derailing yourself through limiting beliefs, or through an entitlement, through a desire to not grow anymore because you think that you have arrived? Here's something to remember when it comes to your story. No hero ends the story the way they began. No hero ends up at the end of the story in the final pages still the same as they were at the beginning. No, they have scars. They have stories to tell. They have a victory they've accomplished. Every hero at the end of the story has stories of pain, suffering, of joy, of heartache, and happiness. But all those stories and all those scars are a tale of victory. Where are you in your story? Are you owning your story? Are you allowing others to own your story, to dictate your story, to write your story? Or have you just stopped writing because you're afraid? Because you're tired? Because you just don't believe in yourself, or you've allowed others to tell you who you are and what you can do? Own your story. If we can help you, this is where coaching comes in. Sometimes we have to work through the things that are going on in our mind. We have to work through the things that are going on in our heart and our soul, those emotions. We have to think of new ways. We have to create a compelling vision. We have to figure out structures and strategies to be able to break through obstacles. If you're in need of coaching personally, if your organization is in need of consulting so it can tell a better story, we'd love to help. Reach out to us. You can go to HaltingWinter.com. Follow us on the socials and spread the good word. Help others continue to live out their story. Until next time.